We'd like to welcome everyone in our first ever virtual council meeting. As you all know, the government shutdown forced us to reschedule this meeting and use this new format. For our March 2014 meeting, however, we anticipate returning to our standard in-person format. For the record, the council members who are present are arts researcher Bruce Carter from Miami Beach, Florida. Philanthropic professional Deepa Gupta from Chicago, Illinois. Musician, attorney, and former member of Congress Paul Hodes from Concord, New Hampshire. Arts fundraising consultant Joan Israelite from Kansas City, Missouri. Music professor and arts presenter Emil Kang from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Arts advocate and patron Charlotte Kessler from Columbus, Ohio. Arts administrator Maria Lopez de Leon from San Antonio, Texas. Organic farmer and author Mas Masamoto from Delray, California. Musician and band leader Irvin Mayfield from New Orleans, Louisiana. Visual artist Barbara Ernst Prey from Oyster Bay, New York. Not able to make today's meeting are Miguel Campaneria, Aaron Dworkin, Joanne Folletta, and Frank Price. Now, let us begin the business we have before us this morning. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of our June 2013 council meeting?
So moved. This is Joan Israelite.
Second, this is Maria Jackson.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Now we will move to the council members' votes and their application and guideline review. I would like to invite our Deputy Chairman for Programs and Partnerships, Patrice Walker Powell, to take us through the next section of the meeting. Patrice.
Thank you, Joan. As we proceed with the application review and guidelines review sections of the agenda, I remind you the tally of votes will be announced at the end of today's session. The council will be voting by ballot today on 937 award recommendations, totaling nearly $26.4 million in 3 funding areas: artworks, leadership initiatives, and literature fellowships. These funding recommendations are found in the corresponding sections of your council materials. Council members have been instructed to email their votes to Kim Jefferson in these 3 funding categories immediately at the conclusion of this part of the meeting. In order for your vote to be tallied, you must be present at the time of the motion, discussion, and vote. Council member affiliations have been recorded in the council book and will be attached to your ballots. And each member has been provided an opportunity to update this information prior to the meeting. Before voting, council members should review the list of recommendations and rejections and add to the list provided in your folders any affiliations that may be missing. Council members are recorded as not voting on applications with which they are affiliated. This list becomes part of the agency's official record. After brief summaries of the 3 funding areas, council members will have the opportunity to ask questions and/or discuss recommendations before voting by ballot. May I have a motion to consider the recommended grants and rejections under artworks, leadership, and fellowships in the council book?
So moved. This is Mas.
Second?
Second, this is Barbara.
Thank you both. I will now summarize the 3 funding areas on which you will be voting and then pause for any comments or questions from council members. The artworks category is the agency's primary category for funding of arts disciplines and encourages and supports the following 4 outcomes: creation, the creation of art that meets the highest standards of excellence; engagement, public engagement with diverse and excellent art; learning, lifelong learning in the arts; and livability, the the strengthening of communities through the arts. These projects recommended for funding are the first group of applications in this category brought to the Council this fiscal year. The second half will be considered at the March meeting next year. Using rounded figures, in March 2013, the agency received 1,528 eligible applications requesting more than $75 million in fiscal year 2014 support. Recommended for the Council's approval are 895 projects totaling up to amounts ranging from $10,000 to $100,000, with an average grant amount of $26,154. Recommended projects span 15 disciplines and fields and are focused primarily on the creation of work and the presentation of both new and existing works to American audiences. Creation and presentation takes the form of commissions, collaborations, original productions, exhibitions, performances, tours, film festivals, artist residencies, literary publications, art in public spaces, and services to the field. Direct grants are recommended to 47 states and the District of Columbia. Are there any comments or questions from the Council? Hearing none, I'll move on to talk about leadership initiatives. Leadership initiatives support a wide variety of projects of national and field-wide significance. At this meeting, the Council is requested to approve funding for 4 projects in 4 artistic disciplines or fields, totaling more than $2 million. Continuing support is requested for Shakespeare in American Communities, Shakespeare for a New Generation, in which professional theater companies will bring performances and educational activities to middle and high school students across the country. The Citizens Institute for Rural Design, which enhances the quality of life and economic viability of small towns and rural communities through workshops focused on planning, design, and creative placemaking. The National Arts and Humanities Youth Program Awards, an interagency effort that recognizes outstanding after-school youth arts, humanities, library, and museum programs. And NEA Walter Reed Healing Arts Partnership for ongoing arts therapy for the military. Are there any questions or comments by the Council? Literature fellowships provide writers with the time and means to create new work. Fellowships of $25,000 each are offered to creative writers in poetry and prose in alternate years. This year, 1,316 eligible prose applications were reviewed by panelists who recommended 38 grants for writers from 19 states, totaling $950,000. Are there any comments or questions from the Council? You may now email your votes to Kim Jefferson on those 3 categories. Finally, there are 2 projects under the Awards Updates tab in your Council book. These grants have been awarded under the Chairman's delegated authority and are brought to the Council's attention at this meeting, but no vote is necessary. Included are 1 Chairman's Extraordinary Action Grant totaling $30,000 and 131 Arts Engagement in American Communities Program grants under the Chairman's Small Grant Authority totaling $1.31 million. Now we will move to the guidelines review portion of the agenda. At this meeting, the Council is asked to consider 2 sets of guidelines. Literature fellowships for poetry for fiscal year 2015 and grants for arts projects also for fiscal year 2015. I will now turn to Jillian Miller, Director of the Office of Guidelines and Panel Operations, who will summarize the guidelines up for a vote at this meeting. Jillian.
Thank you, Patrice. Good afternoon. At this meeting, you're reviewing 2 sets of guidelines, both of which contain updates to existing categories. Your first set of guidelines is for literature fellowships poetry. These guidelines describe the agency's support for fellowships to published creative writers that allow the recipients to set aside time for writing, research, and other career advancement. And there is one change to highlight for you. For the purposes of our eligibility, we're clarifying that one page of poetry in an online publication is considered to be 20 lines or less. Your next set of guidelines is grants for arts projects, and these contain the Artworks and Challenge America Fast Track categories. This year, we're simply making adjustments in the Artworks category. In the Arts Education discipline, we're adding a new project type for collective impact grants, and we've updated the text to reflect the Arts Education Strategic Plan. For all of our disciplines, we're clarifying that we won't make grants for less than $10,000, and we're defining what we mean by fiscal sponsorship. And finally, as a technical note, we'll be changing the way we receive application material and adjusting our deadlines. So stay tuned when we publish the guidelines in January.
Are there any questions or comments from the council members? If not, may I have a motion to approve the guidelines?
This is Maria de Leon. I have a question. Does that category include the folk and traditional?
The Artworks category does support folk and traditional arts grants along with all of the other disciplines, yes.
I just had a question about adding or augmenting. I know that there's a category in there that talks about conferences or meetings of artists. Is there any plan to put in there for a category for development of the field like you have in others?
Are you speaking to a project example that speaks to services to the field? We can certainly take that into
to the guidelines, actually. Field development, if that was something that...
Well, each of the disciplines has a project example that speaks to services to the field and professional development. So it's embedded in each of the disciplines in the Artworks category.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that because I didn't see it listed and I just thought it wasn't embedded in there, in that category. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So again, I'm seeking a motion to approve the guidelines.
So moved. This is Irvin.
Thank
Seconded,
you.
this is Eva.
Thank you very much. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any objections? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. I'm turning the agenda back over to to Joan Shikakawa, our acting chair and senior deputy chair.
Thank you, Patrice. Thank you, Jillian. So while the votes are being collected and tallied, I would like to share a few updates with you. The latest issue of NEA Arts, our quarterly magazine, which is available in hard copy and also on the agency's website, arts.gov, focuses on the intersection between art and science. There's a lot of wonderful material to read, listen to, and watch. And this is also a wonderful time for the issue, because the NEA has recently signed a memorandum of understanding with the National Endowment for the Humanities and the National Science Foundation to put together a working group to explore opportunities to support research, practice, and innovation at the intersection of arts, science, and the humanities. We have established a working group with Bill O'Brien and Michael Orloff representing the NEA, and I look forward to their thinking and to their recommendations. Next, I would like to give you an update about our work with the military community. Our flagship Healing Arts program at the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center continues apace, with creative arts therapists continuing to conduct mask making, music, and writing therapies with patients in the clinical setting. The Department of Defense's network of military hospitals has started paying attention to this work, and Fort Belvoir in Northern Virginia has volunteered to be our partner in the very first expansion beyond Walter Reed. Earlier this month, we announced a 3-month pilot. It will be the same basic arts therapies integrated into the clinical care setting. But Fort Belvoir works with a local outpatient population that is about 10 times as big as NICO's at Walter Reed. So if this pilot goes well, we are prepared to commit to a year of this work, and at the end of which, we will need to look at the models for further expansion in a sustainable and scalable way. Let me now turn to 2 updates from our research office. As you all know, we have released the preliminary findings of the latest iteration of our survey of public participation in the arts. As we suspected, the one finding that got the most play was that live attendance for theater performances and at art museums has declined for the 2nd time in a row, while live attendance at other performing arts events has held flat. In total, in 2008, 35% of American adults attended a jazz, classical music, opera, musical play, or ballet performance, or an art museum or gallery. In 2012, that number dropped to 33%, and that's compared with approximately 40% for all previous years of the survey. Both Sunil in the report itself and our public affairs team in the press release went to great lengths to make 2 points. 1, that these are not the only genres of arts events, live performance, and that live attendance is only one of the forms of arts participation. In total, the report discusses arts consumption through electronic media, movie-going, reading, art making and sharing, visual and performing arts attendance, and arts learning. We'll not be able to report on the aggregated total of these 6 categories until we have the full findings next year. But we do know that at least 71%, and very likely more, of American adults did at least one of these activities. 5 years ago, their combined total was 75% of American adults. But I'm willing to bet that we will be at least level with that, if not even higher. One interesting finding, which we have not been able to report before, is that mobile devices appear to erase any racial or ethnic differences in arts participation. All of these groups listen to music, look at images, and watch theater and dance performances on handheld devices at roughly the same rate. Further, it's interesting to know that across all the arts attendance categories I've just named, there were no declines in participation by non-white racial ethnic groups. So contrary to the general trend, African Americans, Hispanics, and Asian Americans even saw increases in some categories of attendance. The next big announcement from our research office will be the release of the Bureau of Economic Analysis Arts and Cultural Production Satellite Account. This will be a tabulation of art and culture's contribution to our country's gross domestic product, done by the very same agency that calculates the GDP for the country. We'll be releasing these findings on Thursday, December 5th, and then discussing them at a meeting of National Arts Service Organizations the next day. So stay tuned, as this will be a major advancement for all fields. I think that making these data publicly available to everyone has the potential to very much make cultural economics a serious topic for academics and think tanks around the country. Finally, I would just like to remind everyone that the NEA is scheduled to move in February 2014. Everything with that move is on track, and we will make sure that everyone knows how to find us. My final piece of business is to announce that the National Council on the Arts has reviewed the applications and guidelines presented to them. And a tally of the council members' ballots reveals that all recommendations for funding and rejection have passed. So now this is the moment. Are there any additional comments, questions, or discussion from the council members?
This is Joan Israelite, and I would just like to wish all the staff a very easy move to your new home. I imagine that these last months at the post office will be very bittersweet for all of you after all these years. So we look forward to seeing you in the new place in March.
Thank you, Joan. And it is true that it will be bittersweet. In fact, many of the vendors in the food court have already left us, and it's even a little lonely down there. So I would like to thank the entire NEA staff for all of the hard work and dedication that went into preparing for today's council meeting and for everything they do. I'm incredibly proud to be leading this agency and incredibly lucky to know such a dedicated group of public servants. The 180th meeting of the National Council on the Arts is now adjourned. We look forward to seeing you in March.